Tista President and Kavita is our Vice President of the Trust. And we have Geeta Sheshu, Hartosh Bal, Pranjay Guh Adakurta, Meena Kotwal, Naveen Kumar, and Sumit Chavan. Be seated, yeah, don't. No, we will sit there, don't worry. So Tista will introduce the speakers. But one or two words about what happened in the last 2 days. As I was telling at the beginning, there was this media workshop led by the people here and also many who are with you in the audience. So this was one of the objectives of our trust, that we should have workshops like this for media and also see that there is a kind of networking, that we do support each other, because that's the only hope available in the dark times that we are living in today. For the benefit of those who have come from outside as our guests, I'd like to say very few words about Gauri herself. As you all know, that she was in English media, but had to take the mantle of the editorship of Gauri Lankesh Patrike after her father's demise. And it was a kind of turning point in her life, the first turning point. She was not very familiar with Kannada journalism, but she had to learn it, and she did. But the second major turning point came when she became a part of a fact-finding committee to Baba Budangiri, led by eminent playwright Girish Karnad, along with many other eminent Kannada scholars and thinkers. At that time, Baba Budangiri, which is housed in Chikmagalur district, central Karnataka, was known for its Sufi shrine, where it's been there for a long, long time. But then the Sangh Parivar found it a very fertile place to create the trouble. So they wanted to make it into a Hindu shrine. And the moment everybody from various parts of the country descended on that small town and announced that they would like to make this into another Gujarat and Baba Budangiri into another Babri Masjid, I think there was a time for us to sit back and then protest, which we did. And that began with the fact-finding. Gauri was drawn into this kind of activism. From that day onwards, there was no looking back. So she became a part of all kinds of movements, agitations, and in the process even went to jail a couple of times, expressed her solidarity with various marginalized groups, be it Muslims, Adivasis, Dalits, women. And her journalism took a different shape because of her experience as an activist. And it was also at that time that Karnataka saw the activities, Naxalite activities, which became a very hot topic of debate. And again, there was a fact-finding. Gauri was leading it. She went into the forest, met them, tried to negotiate with the government that don't look at it as a law and order problem. So we wanted to create that kind of a discourse that it's a socio-economic problem, we have to address it that way. But then things turned differently, and Gauri was, in a way, expelled from her own paper. It was still then, nobody even knew, even we who were associated with her didn't know that she was an employee, and the paper was owned by her brother. But Gauri sprang back, started her own paper, Gauri Lankesh Patrike, and her activism and the paper that she was running became two parts of the same personality. And then we can see that Gauri, the third, that is the moment that she started her own, she entered into a third phase, and she became very active, never compromised with her principles, and we know that that also led to her sad demise. So this is briefly the trajectory of her life. And two things that she followed. One, not to take any advertisements. That's how her father, Lankesh, had started the paper, continued.
Forgot Babar. I'm so sorry, Babar, मुझे माफ करो.
Oh, sorry.
Babar Meghwanshi is in the poster. I just saw the poster.
No,
Babar,
no.
मुझे माफ करो यार.
No.
अरे नहीं बाबर आइए.
आइए.
कैसा हो सकता है?
Please come, please
मुझे
come.
माफ करना, हम लोग गड़बड़ी में ये हो गया. अभी I'm looking at the thing. I'm so sorry. माफ थोड़ा scattered है.
No, it's...
I'm so sorry, Babar.
So sorry, please have a seat.
Babar will never misunderstand, but I just...
That is to run the paper without advertisements, and the second is to run it without any compromises. And after her assassination, we were all in a shell shock, but then within a year we recovered and then started the paper. Though we couldn't get the same name, we are now running a paper in the same tabloid form, with the same commitment, without advertisement. We call it Nyayapata. Those copies are available outside. You can take a look if you want. And we also have an able editor for that, Mr. Guru Prasad, who is now here. Guru Prasad. Guru, no, just stand up and people want to see. He's now editing that paper for us. So we are also running a media trust which also tries to publish some books which are also there on display. So with this very brief introduction, I would like to request our President Teesta to introduce our guests and then conduct the proceedings of the program. Thank you.
It's always hard. I don't know which day is harder, whether it's the 28th, 29th Jan or whether it is September 5th. But it's one of those things you need to do, that you need to do somehow or the other, because I think the only tribute we can really pay Gauri is to just keep at it, just keep at it, doing something which is innovative, different, and which makes a difference. And I think many of the things that the Gauri Memorial Trust, which we all came together actually in anguish and anger very soon after. I remember marching on the 12th of September. I've never seen, except Hemant Karkare's funeral march in Mumbai, which was also similar, which was after his assassination. I believe it was a weird killing. In 2008, it was Gauri that I saw a funeral of that kind, where, there was anger as much as grief, and immediately we decided to form the trust, and we've had, I think, very meaningful get-togethers or events, or whatever. Events is a bad word, get-together is a bad word, but just coming together in the same remembrances every year. But one of the things that has been bothering us that we've not really managed anything which is process-oriented, which can actually take things that Gauri stood for forward, which is activism and journalism both. And I think that is what the last 2 days were about for the first time. And I'm really thankful for the Indian Social Institute from the bottom of our hearts for giving us this wonderful premise, lovely food, rooms, everything, and also, of course, for the colleagues of the trust and everybody for making this happen. Gauri always said about activists, young activists and journalists, that they are my children. And she got away with a lot of things, and that is one of the things that people loved her for. And therefore, today we will start with the younger journalists. I think that would be the biggest tribute to her. And she is 62 tomorrow. And we have a small get-together at the Samadhi as well. There's no compulsion. Some of us go every year. Whoever wants to can join us there at 9 o'clock. But I'd like to begin without saying too much more, inviting Meena Kotwal, who herself has blazed a pioneering path in journalism and representing very, very professional and community media. And I also want to say that please speak comfortably in any language of your choice. We want to hear you in the language that you're comfortable in. Hindi is also fine, Hindustani is also fine, whatever you would like. Meena Kotwal, Mukh Nayak's editor.
थैंक यू तीस्ता जी, और थैंक यू आप सबका कि आपने मुझे यहाँ बोलने का मौका दिया। कल जो है गौरी जी का जन्मदिन है और हमारे बीच वो नहीं है। अभी जो कन्नड़ में गीत गाया जा रहा था, मुझे समझ नहीं आ रहा था, मुझे कन्नड़ नहीं आती है, लेकिन मैंने यहाँ कई लोगों की आंखों में आंसू देखे। इससे समझ में आता है कि गौरी जी के लिए कितना प्यार है आज भी, उनके काम का, उनका जो व्यक्तित्व था उसके लिए कितना प्यार है उनके दिल में। तो मैं अभी वही कंफर्म भी कर रही थी कि ये जो भाषा थी कन्नड़ ही थी या कोई और थी। तो गौरी जी को मैं बहुत पहले से तो नहीं जानती हूँ, मैं इस पर झूठ भी नहीं बोलूँगी, क्योंकि जब उनको मारा गया उस समय मैं कहूँगी मेरी पत्रकारिता शुरू हुई थी, मेरा जर्नलिज्म शुरू हुआ था। 4 सितंबर 2017 को मैंने जर्नलिज्म एक तरह से शुरू किया था। उससे पहले का काम तो मैं बहुत ज़्यादा काउंट नहीं करती हूँ, लेकिन एक बड़े मीडिया ऑर्गेनाइजेशन के साथ मैं 4 सितंबर को जुड़ी थी और 5 सितंबर को इस तरह की खबर आती है। तो तभी से मैंने उनको जानना शुरू किया, उनके बारे में पढ़ना शुरू किया कि वो किस तरह की महिला थी, किस तरह का काम करती थी कि जिसकी वजह से उनकी जान लेनी जो है सही समझी, जो कुछ लोग पहुंच गए थे उनके घर ही और उनको मारना सही समझा। वो एक महिला पहले थी और जिस तरह का काम कर रही थी, जिस तरह से कि वो धार्मिक कट्टरता पे वो बात करती थी, मुझे लगता है कोई भी धर्म हो और वो अगर कट्टर हो जाए तो सबसे ज्यादा जो नुकसान है वो महिला को पहुंचाता है, चाहे वो हिंदुत्ववादी धर्म हो या कोई और धर्म हो। सबसे ज्यादा जो चोट है वो महिला पर करता है। और ऐसे में एक महिला का इस तरह से बोल के आना, इस तरह से उस बुराई पर काम करना, ये बहुत हिम्मत वाला काम है जिस तरह का वो काम कर रही थी। और शायद इसी वजह से उनको बर्दाश्त नहीं किया इस सोसाइटी में, क्योंकि वो लिखती थी, क्योंकि वो बोलती थी। उनका कलम जो है वो कई लोगों की आवाज थी और ऐसी महिलाओं को बर्दाश्त नहीं करता ये समाज। क्या इतना मुश्किल है किसी महिला को, लिखती और बोलती महिला को बर्दाश्त कर पाना? मैं यहां देख रही हूं कि बहुत ज्यादा तो नहीं, लेकिन 50% महिलाएं भी यहां नहीं हैं। ऐसी महिलाओं को लोग क्यों नहीं पसंद करना चाहते, पता नहीं, मेरे तो समझ में नहीं आता। क्योंकि मैं खुद समझती हूँ कि एक महिला का लिखना बोलना कितना जरूरी है, क्योंकि वो कई पीढ़ियों को जागरूक करता है, सिर्फ एक परिवार को नहीं, अपने आप को नहीं। और ऐसे में गौरी लंकेश जैसी महिला का आना ये बहुत बड़ी और हिम्मती वाली बात है। और इतने सालों बाद भी हम लोग अगर उनको याद कर रहे हैं तो उनका काम आज भी बोलता है। इसीलिए हम सब लोग यहाँ पर मौजूद हैं। शायद मेरी भाषा जो है कई सारे लोगों को समझ नहीं आ रही होगी, क्योंकि मैं हिंदी में बात कर रही हूँ, मेरी इंग्लिश बहुत अच्छी नहीं है, लेकिन फिर भी मैं कोशिश कर रही हूँ कि मैं आपको कनेक्ट कर पाऊँ। और आज इस तरह की महिलाएं, अभी मैं थोड़े दिन पहले ही टिस में गई थी मुंबई में, और वहाँ पर मुझे यहीं की आपके बीच की ही एक महिला मिली थी और उसने मुझे बताया कि कन्नड़ में अभी तक कोई भी ऐसी पत्रकारिता नहीं करता जो हमारे मुद्दे दिखा सके या असल में जो जर्नलिज्म है वो कर रहा हो। पता नहीं, हो सकता है मैं गलत हूं, लेकिन उसने मुझे इस तरह से बताया कि यहाँ पर जैसे दिल्ली में जो है एक तरह का लिबरल मीडिया भी काम कर रहा है जो सरकार पर आवाज उठाता है, लेकिन यहाँ का जो कन्नड़ में है, इंग्लिश का नहीं, सिर्फ मैं कन्नड़ कह रही हूँ, कन्नड़ में इस तरह का मीडिया अभी तक नहीं है। लंकेश पत्रिका इसीलिए काम कर रही थी और इसी वजह से उनको बर्दाश्त नहीं किया गया कि एक महिला कैसे उनके धर्म को और कैसे उनकी जो सोसाइटी में जो नॉर्म्स बना दिए गए हैं उस पर कैसे चोट कर सकते हैं, और वो भी एक महिला होकर। तो बर्दाश्त नहीं किया जाता। और इतने दिनों बाद भी अगर कोई जर्नलिज्म इस तरह का नहीं कर रहा तो ये बहुत सोचने वाली बात है। हम लोग दिल्ली में बैठते हैं, दिल्ली में बहुत सारी चीजें जो हमें सुविधा मिलती है, हम लोग दिल्ली में उसी तरह का काम करने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं जिस तरह से गौरी लंकेश करती थी, जो आवाज उठाती थी, जो बोलती थी। और बोलना बहुत जरूरी है। जिस तरह का भी माहौल बन रहा है, आप लोग जानते हैं कि माहौल किस तरह का है। अभी 22 जनवरी गई है, 22 जनवरी में पूरे देश में क्या माहौल था, इससे क्या बदलेगा? क्या हम एक अच्छी सोसाइटी की तरफ बढ़ रहे हैं? क्या हम आने वाले भारत में या आने वाले जो हमारा जो देश का माहौल है उसमें सरवाइव कर पाएंगे? सीरियसली मुझे बताओ, मैं सोचती हूँ कि शायद मैं सरवाइव नहीं कर पाऊंगी। ये हमारे पास दो ही ऑप्शन है, या तो हमारी जान जाएगी या काम खत्म होगा, या फिर हम लोग भी जो सरकार के तोते बन जाएंगे। सरकार का तोता बनना शायद मंजूर ना होगा, तो हो सकता है हमारा जो हश्र है वो भी गौरी लंकेश जैसा ही हो जाए, क्योंकि हम लोग ये काम करना बंद नहीं कर सकते। ये अंदर से हमारे आता है कि हम लोग काम करें। हम नहीं बर्दाश्त कर सकते कि सोसाइटी में गलत हो रहा है और हम दिखा सकें कि अच्छा अच्छा हो रहा है। अभी हाल ही में नीति आयोग की रिपोर्ट आप लोगों ने देखी होगी, जिसमें बताया गया कि जो है गरीबी कम हो गई है। आपको सच में लगता है कि गरीबी कम हो गई है? 2020 में जिस तरह से कोरोना आया, कोविड आया, कई सारे लोगों की नौकरियां चले गई, खाने को घर में दाना नहीं है, और हम बात कर रहे हैं कि गरीबी चले गई। और पूरा मीडिया जो है इसको इतने अच्छे से दिखा रहा है कि देखो गरीबी कम हो गई इस सरकार के आने से। 25 करोड़ को तो मुफ्त में जो राशन है आप खुद देते हैं, आप खुद बताते हैं ये सरकारी आंकड़ा है। तो सच में हमें सिर्फ उस दाने की जरूरत है, हमें नौकरी की, हमें हेल्थ की, हमें किसी चीज की जरूरत नहीं है। तो ये कैसा मीडिया है जो हमारी बात ही नहीं कर रहा? हम लोग यहाँ इकट्ठा हुए, मुझे लगता है हम में से कोई भी ऐसा नहीं चाहता होगा कि ये मीडिया ये दिखाए। हम वो मीडिया चाहते हैं जो हमारी आवाज बने, जो हमारे अधिकारों की बात करे, जो हमारी बात करे, लेकिन फिर भी वो मीडिया दिखाने को तैयार नहीं है। और अगर कोई दिखाएगा तो हो सकता है उनका गौरी लंकेश जैसा हश्र होगा। थोड़ा सा अंदर से भावुक हूं, क्योंकि मैं पहली बार इस मंच पर आई हूं गौरी लंकेश जी के उस पर, और यहाँ पर लोगों से बहुत मतलब जब मैंने देखे उस गीत पर आंसू आ रहे थे तो मुझे लग रहा था कि ये माहौल बहुत भावुक होने वाला है। लेकिन फिर भी हमें बोलना है, क्योंकि बोलना बहुत जरूरी है आज के डेट में। हो सकता है कल हम ना जिए। डॉक्टर अंबेडकर हमेशा कहते थे आपका जीवन जो है लंबा नहीं होना चाहिए, दूसरों के लिए बड़ा होना चाहिए। तो हो सकता है हम लोग कल रहे ना रहे, लेकिन हम लोग इतना काम करके चले जाएं कि कल को हमें भी गौरी लंकेश जैसा याद किया जाए। हमें भी कोई पीछे पूछने वाला हो कि मूक नायक था या मीना कोटवाल थी तो कुछ काम हुआ, और ऐसे ही जो है हम लोग खाली हाथ ना चले जाएं। थैंक यू सो मच।
कई साल कई साल after working many years in quote unquote mainstream journalism to be asked to leave your job and then start a channel which is doing extraordinarily well, and he's become a name. In fact, day before yesterday when we were taking a walk around the campus, a couple came across walking because they saw him shoot a video from the campus, and they said that looks like the ISI campus, let's go and catch him there. Naveen Kumar from Article 19. I mean, he's also one of the persons I think would qualify maybe as one of Gauri's children. You're just not there, you're not young enough, but still. Yeah.
आप सब लोगों को मेरा सलाम। और आज जब गौरी लंकेश के जन्मदिन पर जब मैं इतने सारे लोगों को यहां इकट्ठा देख रहा हूं, तो मेरा मन होता है ये कहने का कि मीना परेशान होने की जरूरत नहीं है। ये सारे लोग इस बात की गारंटी देने के लिए यहां आए हैं कि हम एक और गौरी लंकेश नहीं होने देंगे। ये मुल्क, इस मुल्क का आईन, इस देश का संविधान, लोकतंत्र, मेरा इसमें अटूट विश्वास है। और इसी विश्वास के तहत मेरी तरह के तमाम लोग ये ताकत लेने के लिए यहां आए हैं कि हमें अंदाजा है कि देश में क्या चल रहा है। हमें अंदाजा है कि हमें नागरिक से भीड़ में बदला जा रहा है। हमें अंदाजा है कि हमें दिल से संविधान के खिलाफ ले जाया जा रहा है। हमें अच्छी तरह अंदाजा है कि हमें मनुष्य से जानवर में तब्दील करने की नापाक कोशिश हो रही है। लेकिन यहां से आगे का सवाल यह है कि क्या हम सब इसको होने देंगे, और क्या इसके बावजूद होने देंगे कि हमारे सामने गौरी लंकेश जैसी एक अद्भुत ताकत, साहस और जीवट वाली महिला का उदाहरण खड़ा है, और मैं गौरी लंकेश को सिर्फ एक महिला होने की छूट देने को तैयार नहीं है। उनका व्यक्तित्व विराट है। उन्हें सिर्फ महिला होने के खित्ते में समेटना वैसा ही होगा जैसे बाबा साहब भीमराव अंबेडकर को दलित होने के खित्ते में समेटना। हमें थोड़ा और व्यापक होने की जरूरत है। हमें थोड़ा और विस्तृत होने की जरूरत है, विशाल होने की जरूरत है, और चीजों को साफ साफ देखने की जरूरत है। और इसलिए जरूरत है कि इस मुल्क में जो चल रहा है, आदमी और आदमी के खिलाफ जो माहौल बनाया जा रहा है, आदमी और औरत के बीच जो माहौल बनाया जा रहा है, हिंदू और मुसलमान के बीच जो झगड़े खड़े किए जा रहे हैं, मुसलमान और ईसाई के बीच, हिंदू और ईसाई के बीच जो तमाशा किया जा रहा है, हमें बताया जा रहा है कि एक झंडा लहरा देने भर से तुम देश प्रेमी हो जाओगे, और अगर उस झंडे को लहराने की कीमत मनुष्यता की मौत है, तब भी तुमको वो झंडा लहराना होगा। हमको ये समझाया जा रहा है। तो क्या हम इस बात को समझने को राजी हैं? मैं जानता हूं कि अगले 3 महीने के भीतर इस देश में किस तरीके की फसाद की तैयारी चल रही है। हमारी तरह के लोगों को पता है कि किस तरीके से आजाद जुबानों को रोकने की कोशिश की जा रही है। हमें पता है कि सच बोलने की कीमत क्या क्या हो सकती है, लेकिन हम ये ऐलान करना चाहते हैं कि उस सच बोलने की कीमत चाहे जो हो, हम वो कीमत चुकाने को तैयार हैं। और ये कोई कृपा नहीं है, ये कोई एहसान नहीं है, ये जरूरत भी नहीं है, ये हमारी और आपकी आत्मा की पुकार है। हम यही चाहते हैं, हम चाहते हैं कि इस देश में जब तक हमारी नस्लें हैं तब तक ये संविधान रहेगा और तब तक लोकतंत्र रहेगा। मैं अपने लिए चिंतित नहीं हूं मेरे दोस्त, मैं इधर बैठे लोगों के लिए या उधर बैठे लोगों के लिए, हम सब चिंतित नहीं हैं। हमारी चिंताएं इससे आगे की हैं कि आज नहीं तो कल जब हमारी नस्लें हमसे पूछेंगी कि जब इस देश के हिंदुओं को इस देश के 20 करोड़ आबादी के खिलाफ खड़ा कर दिया गया था तो तुम क्या कर रहे थे। जब हमारी आने वाली नस्लें हमसे पूछेंगी कि जब मंदिर और मस्जिद के फसाद में तुम्हें मनुष्यता के खिलाफ खड़ा कर दिया गया था तब तुम क्या कर रहे थे। जब हमसे पूछा जाएगा कि इस देश के विश्वविद्यालयों को, इस देश के अस्पतालों को, इस देश के संवैधानिक संस्थानों को नीलाम कर दिया जा रहा था, तब तुम क्या कर रहे थे, तब हमारी तरह के लोगों का जवाब होगा कि मैं किसी चौराहे पर खड़ा होकर लोगों को जागरूक कर रहा था। इस खतरे को समझने की जरूरत है। और गौरी लंकेश के जन्मदिन के मौके पर मैं बहुत साफ साफ बात करना चाहता हूं कि पाबंदी कोई मीडिया पर नहीं है, पाबंदी किसी मेरी या आपकी जुबान पर नहीं है, पाबंदी लोकतंत्र की पुकार पर है, हर सोचने वाले दिमाग पर है, हर उस आदमी पर है जो अपनी कोई सोच रखता है। और सबसे ज्यादा सोचने वाले लोग विश्वविद्यालयों में रहते हैं, स्कूलों में रहते हैं, कॉलेजों में रहते हैं। और इसलिए इस देश के सारे शैक्षणिक संस्थानों को प्राइवेट इंस्टीट्यूशंस में बदल देने का नाटक चल रहा है। आप कल्पना कीजिए 1990 में जब शुरुआत हुई प्राइवेटाइजेशन की, तब इस देश में केवल एक प्राइवेट यूनिवर्सिटी थी, सिक्किम मणिपाल यूनिवर्सिटी। आज इस देश में 400 से ज्यादा प्राइवेट यूनिवर्सिटीज हैं। ये प्राइवेट यूनिवर्सिटीज किन लोगों के लिए खड़ी की जा रही है, किन लोगों के लिए एजुकेशन सिस्टम को महंगा किया जा रहा है, और किस लिए किया जा रहा है? इसलिए किया जा रहा है कि इस देश के गरीब लोग, इस देश के मजदूर लोग, इस देश में रिक्शा चलाने वाले, ऑटो चलाने वाले, सड़क साफ करने वाले, बिस्तर ठीक करने वाले, जूठे बर्तन धोने वाले, मालिशी और बेगारों के बच्चे पढ़ लिख ना जाए, आपसे बराबरी की बात ना करने लगे, और इसलिए इस देश में एजुकेशन सिस्टम को महंगा किया जा रहा है। खतरा जितना बड़ा हमको नजर आता है उससे कहीं ज्यादा बड़ा है। यह साजिश है उन तमाम लोगों के खिलाफ जो बराबरी का अधिकार चाहते हैं, जो समानता का अधिकार चाहते हैं, जिनका विश्वास न्याय और बंधुत्व की अवधारणा में है। और इसलिए हमारी तरह के लोग साफ साफ कहना चाहते हैं कि उन लोगों को बचाइए जो लोग बहुत जोखिम लेकर सोचने का काम कर रहे हैं, उन लोगों को बचाइए जो सोचने के बाद बोलने का काम कर रहे हैं, और सबसे ज्यादा उन लोगों को बचाइए जो सोचने के बाद, बोलने के बाद सड़कों पर उतरने का काम कर रहे हैं। अगर किसी को मुगालता है कि ट्विटर पर लिखने से, वीडियो बनाने से, फेसबुक और यूट्यूब करने से इस देश में कोई बदलाव आने जा रहा है, और जब मैं बदलाव कह रहा हूं तो मेरा आशय सत्ता में बदलाव से हरगिज नहीं है, यह छोटा सोचना होगा। मेरा आशय वैचारिक बदलाव से है। हम कैसे सोचते हैं उसमें बदलाव से है, और हमारी सोच को बदलने के लिए जरूरी है कि उन तमाम लोगों को बचाया जाए जो हमें बता रहे हैं कि रास्ता इधर है, और साफ नजरों से नहीं देखोगे तो गड्ढे में गिर जाओगे। ये दंगाई सोच के लोग क्यों बनाए जा रहे हैं? क्योंकि उनको स्कूलों से बाहर किया गया, उनको यूनिवर्सिटी से बाहर किया गया। किसी के भी हाथ से आप कलम और किताब छीन लीजिए, उसके हाथ में तलवार थमाने का रास्ता बहुत आसान हो जाएगा। मेरे दोस्त, इस देश के लोगों ने इसलिए तलवार उठाया। मैं ये मानने को राजी नहीं हूं कि इस देश के ज्यादातर लोग इस देश के 20 करोड़ लोगों को खत्म कर देना चाहते हैं, मैं ये नहीं मानने को राजी, लेकिन मैं इसलिए मानना चाहता हूं इस बात को क्योंकि उनको अवसर नहीं दिया गया। आप जरा सोच कर देखिए, क्या अजीब बात है कि मैडम निर्मला सीतारमण के बच्चे अमेरिका में पढ़ते हैं, जयराम रमेश के बच्चे अमेरिका में पढ़ते हैं, विदेश मंत्री के बच्चे कहीं और पढ़ते हैं, कोई प्रिंसटन यूनिवर्सिटी में पढ़ता है, कोई हार्वर्ड यूनिवर्सिटी में पढ़ता है। जिन्होंने कहा इस देश के गद्दारों को जूते मारो, वो इंग्लैंड से पढ़ के आए मिनिस्टर साहब। उनकी मजबूरी है कि भारत में अपने बच्चों की स्कूलिंग कराना पड़ती है, नहीं तो वो भी ना करें, और वो चाहते हैं कि हमारे बच्चे गुरुकुल में पढ़ें। कुछ लोग तो ये भी कहते हैं कि आप 8 बच्चे पैदा करो और 4 बच्चे देश की सेवा में कुर्बान कर दो। तो आप क्यों नहीं पैदा करते? आप भी करो 1 बच्चा कुर्बान। आप कोई उदाहरण तो दो। लेकिन ये जानते हैं कि इस देश में जब तक कि समान शिक्षा व्यवस्था नहीं है, जब तक सबके पास बराबर अवसर नहीं है, तब तक इस देश को हाँकना बड़ा आसान है। हाँकना मतलब अपने तरीके से चलाना। हम सब इसलिए एक दूसरे के खिलाफ खड़े कर दिए गए क्योंकि हमसे सोचने समझने की ताकत छीन ली गई। और जब मैं प्राइवेटाइजेशन की बात कर रहा हूं तो केवल एजुकेशनल प्राइवेटाइजेशन की बात नहीं है, केवल हेल्थ सिस्टम में एक घटना बता रहा हूं। आज से 4 दिन पहले दिल्ली के ऑल इंडिया इंस्टीट्यूट ऑफ मेडिकल साइंसेस के बाहर मैं घूम रहा था। रात के 11:30 बजे सैकड़ों लोग सड़कों पर सो रहे थे, सर्दी की रात में, जब उस रात दिल्ली का तापमान 5 डिग्री सेल्सियस था। सैकड़ों लोग सड़कों पर सो रहे थे। 22 जनवरी की रात थी, कंबल ओढ़कर कड़कड़ाती हुई ठंड में, लेकिन आयरनी देखिए, हर एक आदमी के सिरहाने एक दिया जल रहा था। एक दिया जल रहा था क्योंकि एक महामानव ने कहा था कि आज दिया जलाओ, आज जश्न की रात है। इस जश्न में शरीक होने से हम इनकार करते हैं। हमें बचपन से एक झूठ पढ़ाया गया है कि यह देश एक तरह का देश है, यह देश एक है। नहीं साहब, यह देश एक नहीं है। जो देश मेरा है वो आपका देश नहीं है, वो उनका देश नहीं है। मेरी खान पान अलग, मेरी सोचने समझने का तरीका अलग, मेरा एस्पिरेशन अलग, मुझे कुछ और हासिल करना है, आपको कुछ और हासिल करना है। इस झूठ को बर्दाश्त करने की ताकत हमें हासिल करके हमको बताया गया है कि इस देश को एक मानना पड़ेगा। दुनिया में मैकडोनल्ड का आपने सुना होगा, मैकडोनल्ड के बर्गर के बारे में। मैकडोनल्ड के बर्गर की एक खासियत होती है, आप चाहे अपने बंगलुरु के किसी ढाबे पर खा लीजिए या अमेरिका के टाइम्स स्क्वायर पर खाइए, उसका स्वाद एक जैसा होता है। क्योंकि एक ही तरह का पाव होता है, एक कड़े से उसके आलू को निकाला जाता है, एक ही तापमान पर तौल उसको पकाया जाता है, एक तरह का मसाला बनाया जाता है और एक ही तरह का स्वाद आता है। इस देश के लोगों को मैकडोनल्ड का बर्गर बनाने की कोशिश की जा रही है। एक तरीके की सोच, एक तरीके की भाषा, एक तरह की बोली, एक तरह का खान पान, एक तरह का कपड़ा और एक ही नेता। और अगर आप ऐसा नहीं करोगे, आप अलग तरीके से सोचना शुरू करोगे, अलग तरीके की बोली बोलना शुरू करोगे, अलग तरीके के कपड़े पहनना शुरू करोगे, अलग तरीके के विचार रखना शुरू करोगे, तो आपको कहा जाएगा आप देशद्रोही हो, आपको पाकिस्तान फेंक दिया जाएगा। हमें सोचना पड़ेगा, हमें कुछ कठिन सवालों से जूझना पड़ेगा, हमें अपने भीतर झांकना पड़ेगा और तब यह तय करना पड़ेगा कि क्या सत्ता में बदलाव से कोई चीज होने वाली है, नहीं होगी। इसलिए हमें वैचारिक बदलाव के बारे में सोचना होगा। गौरी लंकेश ने जिन वजहों से अपनी कुर्बानियां दी, जिन लोगों के लिए अपनी कुर्बानियां दी और जिस विचार के पक्ष में अपनी कुर्बानी दी, उसको जिंदा रखने के लिए जरूरी है कि करा के दंगा जला के बस्ती मुआवजा बांटता है जो अब, करा के दंगा जला के बस्ती मुआवजा बांटता है जो अब, उठो के मिलजुल करके हमको उसका खाना खराब करना। बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया।
शुक्रिया बहुत बहुत नवीन जी। लगता है कि हिंदी जबान वाले उत्तर भारतीय लोग को कुछ अलग ही अंदाज होता है पब्लिक स्पीकिंग का। हम लोग को तो बहुत साल लग गए बिफोर वी कुड इवन बिगिन। थैंक यू सो मच। अपने ही पेशे को ललकारना, to be able to challenge your compatriots and to do it with integrity and passion. Several years in journalism in the Hindi media, ABP, Zee News, and then having the courage to start his own community media organization, the Shudra and the Newsbeak, and also to ask harsh questions of his colleagues and peers, but with no harsh feelings, but with a desire to be able to open up further channels of collaboration. Sumit Chauhan.
Jai Bhim to everybody. Your fate would be like Gauri Lankesh. This is how I am being reminded every day about Gauri. Being a journalist is not a crime in India, but just by doing your job, you are being assassinated like Gauri. But I would say that people like Gauri are, they're not dead. You cannot kill them. Their ideas are always there. Their ideas are always relevant with us and will carry their legacy. So we are very proud of her legacy, the journalism legacy, whatever she has built up. And me, being a community media journalist coming from a Dalit background, we have seen the worst situation in this nation. We have seen the worst. Our people are being killed, our people are being, targeted, they are tortured, and our women are being raped, gang raped, murdered. So this is kind of violence we are seeing in this nation. But now that violence is going to the other people also. The people are the next target. So if I'm a journalist, I'm honestly doing my job. This is not a crime and I should not be killed for it. But if you dare to kill me, I'm not going to stop it. I have a dare, I have chosen this path. I have chosen this path to keep the baton, to pass this baton to my next generations. Because being a community journalist, I see that anti-caste movement is like a relay race. You keep passing the baton to another person, that person, keep passing that baton to another person. So this is how we are going on. This is how we can keep the legacy of Gauri's journalism to another peoples also, the journalist people also. Now Indian media is totally anti-national media, I would say. This is not the mainstream media, we call it Manustream media because of its casteist nature. They have the casteist people around them. They have a full, Savarna lobby, the same upper caste people around them. And those people are feeding the poison in the venom to the, audiences every day. I've been part of the mainstream media, that's why I know it very closely. So we have to build some kind of alternative media which is the people friendly, which is doing the journalism of people friendly, their choices, they are talking about their rights, they are talking about their basic necessities and what we are doing. what Gauri was doing. So Gauri was not doing something against the, the traditional things. It was just challenging the status quo. It was just challenging that how you can have a mindset, you can say that only few kind of people, few kind of mentality, few kind of, mindset would only be in India. This is not the one nation. This is not the one kind of nation you want to have. We have the diversity. We have the different people around us. We need the diversity, 5 people around us. So we need a beautiful India where we have all languages, we all have colors, we all have caste, we all have genders, we all have sexual orientations, we all have food habits. We need that kind of India, not that kind of India which RSS and other people are, propagating now. So Baba Sahib Dr. Ambedkar, when he was, making India's constitution, he said that he was talking about the idea of India. That in idea of India, it should be inclusive, it should not be exclusive. Like you cannot exclude the people from the mainstream, you cannot. You should have the better people around you, you should have every last person, in the mainstream. So that's the idea of India we need to carry out. And me, I would say that I'm not afraid of the hate speech, I'm not afraid of the threats, I'm not, afraid of any kind of hate or the government sanctions on us. We're going to keep it up because we have seen the worst thing in our generations. Being a Dalit, we are born fighter people. I would say that my people, we are born fighters. Our people were thrown out of the village, right? We were thrown out of village, that you have to, stay out of the village. You have to face the wild animals. We were fighting against the wild animals, but we survived. They denied us the very basic right of water. We drank polluted water. Still we are drinking polluted water, but still we are surviving. They said you cannot be into the mainstream, but we are building our mainstream. We are building our own voices now. So we are born fighter and we are not going to succumb to such kind of pressures. We'll keep the legacy alive, we'll keep the journalism alive, and we are very proud of Gauri's legacy. And as Teesta Madam was saying, that we are like journalists, we are like their children's. All the young journalists are like their children. So if we have a mother like Gauri and we have a mother like Teesta, why would we need to worry about? So we'll keep the legacy alive. I'm really thankful to the Gauri Memorial Trust, and I really pass my salute to Gauri, that yes, you are there in our heart, we believe in your idea, and we'll keep carry this. Thank you so much. Jai Bhim.
Some persons' journeys are so interesting and fascinating that, I've known Bhavarji for, I think, I don't know how many years, 25, 30 years. When he first started editing Diamond, and he was a young activist working with MKSS also in Rajasthan. And as he told us his own stories and his community stories, weavers from Rajasthan. But when he wrote the book, I can't be a Hindu, because he had been with the Rashtriya Swayam Sevak Sangh when he was young, and then he quit. And I would like to suggest that Bhavar Meghvanshi is a writer, activist, author, and also a journalist. And he's also a mentor to many other Dalit journalists and young journalists and other journalists. I don't think we should say Dalit journalists, but all journalists, community or otherwise. And what is amazing about Bhavarji is that he believes in constantly bringing networks together, different networks together, so that conversations keep going. And we all are strong-headed people, that there are conflicts, but the conflicts should get resolved. There should be some dialogues between us. So Bhavar Meghvanshi.
कन्नड़ में नहीं बोल पाने के लिए माफ़ करें आप मुझे। गौरी लंकेश जी को नमन करते हुए, उनको याद करते हुए और उनकी निर्भीकता को सलाम करते हुए मैं शुक्रिया अदा करता हूं गौरी लंकेश जी को नमन करते हुए, उनको याद करते हुए और उनकी निर्भीकता को सलाम करते हुए मैं शुक्रिया अदा करता हूं गौरी मेमोरियल ट्रस्ट का कि उन्होंने मौका दिया हम अपनी बात यहाँ पर कह सकें। मुझे लगता है कि ये सबसे
जहां गौरी लंकेश जैसे विचारशील कर्मशील पत्रकारों की जरूरत इस देश को है। और ये ऐसा समय है जहां पत्रकारिता जिस तरीके से एक्ट कर रही है वो आप देख सकते हैं कि आज का पत्रकार क्या हो गया है। अभी 22 जनवरी को आपने देखा होगा कि वो आपको कैसे फर्क कर पा रहे होंगे कि ये पत्रकार हैं या कोई तमाशाबीन है या पूरा भगवा पहन करके, और जिस तरीके से राम मंदिर की खुशियों में जर्नलिस्ट नाच रहे थे नॉर्थ इंडिया के, तो आपको लगा होगा कि ये कैसा देश और कैसा मीडिया है और ये मीडिया कहाँ ले जाएगा हम सब लोगों को। तो आज इस मौके पर हमें ये चिंता, हम खास तौर पे हिंदी मीडिया का तो हम बहुत चिंतित हैं। मुझे नहीं मालूम कि कन्नड़ मीडिया का क्या हाल है, अंग्रेजी मीडिया में भी थोड़ा बहुत और भी चीज़ें हैं जहाँ लोग बोलते हैं, समझते हैं, बात करते हैं, लेकिन हिंदी और नॉर्थ इंडिया की जो और छोटी मोटी भाषाएं हैं उनका मीडिया पूरी तरीके से अंधविश्वासों में और अवैज्ञानिक सोच को समाज में पेश करने में पूरा काम में लगा हुआ है। तो ये ऐसा समय है जहां गौरी लंकेश ने जो किया या नरेंद्र दाभोलकर ने जो किया, कलबुर्गी जी ने जो किया, कॉमरेड पानसरे ने जो किया, और जो हमारा संविधान कहता है, एक साइंटिफिक टेम्परामेंट की बात कहता है, वैज्ञानिक समझ की बात कहता है, उस बात को फिर से याद करने की जरूरत है। क्योंकि अब जो हालात है, हम अघोषित रूप से
जिस तरह का पूरा माहौल बनाया जा रहा है उसमें ये चिंता करने की जरूरत है कि कैसा देश हमारा बनने जा रहा है। और इसलिए ये मौका है कि हम गौरी लंकेश जैसे काम को आगे भी बढ़ाएं, उसको याद भी रखें। चूंकि मेरा ज़्यादातर समय सिविल सोसाइटी मूवमेंट के साथ रहा, तो हम अपरिचित कभी नहीं रहे गौरी लंकेश जी के विचारों से। वो देश भर में उनका आना जाना होता था, और खास तौर पे मुझे याद है कि वो नए जो भी लोग बोलते थे या नए एक्टिविस्ट उभरते थे, उनके प्रति उनका बहुत प्यार था। आप उनकी ऐसी तस्वीरें देख सकते हैं जिसमें वो जिग्नेश मेवानी से लगा करके कन्हैया कुमार तक को अपने बच्चों की तरह मेंटर करती थी। तो ऐसे एक मेंटर का नहीं होना इस पूरे देश का एक बहुत बड़ा नुकसान है। लेकिन उन्होंने जो विरासत हमको सौंपी, उन्होंने जो विचार हमको सौंपा, उन्होंने जो निडरता हमको सौंपी, मुझे लगता है कि वो एक समय है जहां हमारे लिए बहुत उपयोगी चीज है। और जिस दिशा में ये देश जा रहा है, जिस तरीके से एक कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल डेमोक्रेसी को खत्म करने की कोशिश की जा रही है, जिस तरीके से एक थियोक्रेटिक स्टेट बनाने को की तरफ इस देश को ले जाया जा रहा है, और विश्वविद्यालयों में यज्ञ और हवन हो रहे हैं, पूजा पाठ हो रहे हैं, गोमूत्र पर और गोबर पर रिसर्च किए जा रहे हैं, ऐसी स्थिति में ये देश कहाँ जाएगा, ये बहुत बड़ी चिंता का विषय है। और जिस तरीके से मीडिया का एक जो रोल है आज की तारीख में, वो घुटनों पर नहीं है, हाथ नहीं जोड़ रखे हैं, बल्कि वो जमीन पर लेट करके रेंग रहे हैं। और आप ऐसे फोटो देख सकते हैं जहां ढोंगी बाबाओं के पैरों के पास में सैकड़ों की तादाद में मीडिया के जो माइक हैं वो पड़े हुए जब आप देखते हैं, तो आप भारत के मीडिया की औकात को समझ सकते हैं कि वो कहां उनका स्थान है और वो कहां पे बैठे हुए हैं। और जो विचार असहमति का है, जो विचार विज्ञान के पक्ष का है, लोकतंत्र के पक्ष का है, और जो भी इस देश की डाइवर्सिटी के पक्ष का विचार है, सेकुलरिज्म के पक्ष का विचार है, उन सारे विचारों के खिलाफ मीडिया पूरी तरीके से ताकत के साथ खड़ा हुआ है। तो ऐसे मौके पर ये जो चौथा खंबा अपने आप को कहता है मीडिया, हालांकि सारे खंबे लोकतंत्र के गिर गए हैं ऐसा लगता है, केवल मीडिया ही इतना नीचे गिरा है ऐसा नहीं है, बल्कि जो भी है, जुडिशरी का भी क्या हाल है, या संसद का क्या हाल है, हमारा चुनाव आयोग क्या स्थिति में है। तो लोकतंत्र के सारे स्तंभों के गिरने के साथ साथ मीडिया का भी जो क्षरण है, उसमें एक नए किस्म के मीडिया की जरूरत है, जहां पर हम सब एक दूसरे के हाथ को पकड़ें और एक नया नया चौथा स्तंभ नहीं बल्कि एक सारा नया लोकतंत्र के हर स्तंभ को बनाने की कोशिश हम करें। और ये काम मुझे लगता है कि तीस्ता जी और तमाम लोगों ने उनके नेतृत्व में जो शुरू किया और पिछले 2 दिन हमने इस सारी चीज पे चिंतन किया, तो भविष्य में शायद हम एक अच्छा चीज कर पाएंगे। और चूंकि पूरा देश के लोग यहाँ पर है, तमिलनाडु से लगा के, केरला से लगा करके, और दिल्ली और उत्तराखंड, सब दूर से लोग आए हैं, और पूर्वोत्तर से लगा के कश्मीर तक की बातें हुई है, तो मुझे लगता है कि ये एक सही समय भी है और सही दिशा में भी हमारा काम जा रहा है। गौरी लंकेश को सच्ची श्रद्धांजलि इसी में है कि हम भारत के संविधान को, इस देश को, लोकतंत्र को और मीडिया की जो जवाबदेही है उन सबको बचाते हुए काम करें। बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद। जय भारत, जय भीम।
On behalf of the Gauri Memorial Trust, again, something I've been repeating for the last 2 days, this whole effort of the last 2 days has been planned over several months, and among the senior peers in journalism who really helped to put this together, made sure that every dimension of the crisis was actually looked at carefully. Bhavarji was one of them, of course. There was Venkatesh Ramakrishnan, who's also with us today. There was Siddharth Vadarajan from The Wire, there was Dhanya Rajendran from the News Minute, and there was Hartosh Bal from The Caravan. And I really want to express my gratitude, because without that sort of hand-holding and guidance, we would not have been able to put the last 2 days together. It has been quite an experience. I think we'll only be able to really do justice to it when a good report comes out. We are hoping that a report will come out in about 6 weeks' time. That's our aim. We'll take some of your feedback for the report also and pester you to help us. Geeta's here, very good editor. We'll take some of your help also, because we want to bring this document out so that. But I don't want to get into that now. Hartosh Singh is the executive editor of The Caravan. We also have with us Mr. Anant Nath in the audience, who's the chairperson of the Editors Guild, and with us, and so many other senior journalists. And Hartosh has been formerly, he was also political editor of The Caravan, and before that the editor of Open Magazine, and also with Tehelka, and also with the Indian Express and several publications. He's also the author of many, many books. And for those of us from a generation who love the long read and really meaningful writing, I think Caravan is something we go to. And having subscribed for a year or more, we also share that information with many people, I must admit, because many, many young people just request the long-form stories that you so diligently put out. Thank you so much. Hartosh.
Good evening. My own acquaintance with Gauri Lankesh was actually formed over a few brief encounters between 2014 and 2017. We met actually in Delhi a few times. At occasions like this, to speak about both the state of the media and the state of the country, it was quite clear what was happening. And I think one thing was clear: rather than larger ideological positions, there was an attitude that I think we all need to share with her, which was that you don't yield, you don't give up. There is a need for persistence, whatever the electoral mandate, whatever the changes in society that we are dealing with. Today, I want to stay with the idea of reconstructing the fourth estate. I mean, the fourth estate today, at least the part of it that works, is being literally called the fifth columnist of the state today. We are anti-nationals. We are supposed to be doing something that undermines the structure of the state. But this is happening at a certain moment in time where something is very evident before us, but it still needs to be spelt out. I think Bhamar ji here mentioned 22nd. At the time the national flag was actually adopted, we are all aware the RSS rejected it. They did not want the national flag, they did not want the tricolor, they wanted the Bhagwa flag instead. From 2014 onwards, they've used the national flag, waved it in our faces. But in the end, they do not shy away from their stated goals. Everything they have done today, they've been announcing through their history of 100 years. On 26 January, me and my partner, we were speaking to one of the young boys who distributes the flags at the street corners. And the number of flags that were being picked up this year were far lower than any other year. In houses, in colonies, through Delhi, all you could see on Jan 26th was the Bhagwa waving. The transition that the RSS wants is a transition that goes back to what they had always announced. They are not interested in the tricolor. The Bhagwa is the reality, its symbolism, its constitutional provisions await us as we go into the next 4 or 5 years. But how was this reality constructed? We pay a lot of attention to the ideology of the RSS, to what it conveys, to the work the RSS has done on the ground. But there is also the question of reality itself and how it is constructed. We saw it in the run-up to Ayodhya. I can quote dozens or maybe hundreds of liberal intellectuals in Delhi, media persons who were saying the Ram Temple, the appeal of the Ram Temple has run its course. But the fact is, the media was used, an event was structured, it was propagated and broadcast into every of our homes, and it did what it was expected to do. This reality that was constructed is the reality that has come before us. A lot of us was bemused when Narendra Modi would pay the kind of attention he did to the G20 when I was traveling through Madhya Pradesh for the state elections. In place after place, all that I encountered from people was that India has reached a place on the world stage that was never possible before. You could inquire about why they thought so, what was the achievement, what made them think so, why did they believe so. It didn't matter. These were small hamlets, these were small villages. I'm talking of feedback from across castes. This was a reality that had been constructed for them, and this is the reality that had taken hold of our country. This reality is not possible without control over the media. And when I speak of the media, I talk largely of the mainstream media, because we do spend a lot of time on the independent media, the work the independent media does, the small structures. But if we've been largely allowed to escape unscathed, and not all of us have escaped unscathed, I think Geeta here will speak about it, is because the complete control over mainstream media is unprecedented. There is only one reality. You can have a number of, you can have tens of channels in English, maybe 50 channels in Hindi, 100 channels in regional languages. All of them are broadcasting the same message. And this is what is going everywhere. And we need to understand why this control came to be. I do want to distinguish, we often speak of the words media and journalism interchangeably. These are not interchangeable words. This is media, the television is media, the internet is media. The control of the sources of communication is media. It is the difference between mistaking the hospital structure and the doctors themselves. Journalism is or journalists themselves are akin to what doctors are in the structure of a hospital, and the media is this larger superstructure over which there is complete control. So when we use it interchangeably, we often make the mistake of, we've had several surveys on diversity within the newsroom. But you know, it is a huge problem. It is largely upper caste. It is largely, if you look at editors from liberal to what you would call Godi media, you will see not even just upper caste, but largely Brahmin dominated at the position of editors. But there is a more important absence of diversity if you turn your lens to the media. Who owns the media? If you examine the diversity there, that diversity is shocking. The media is in the hands of a handful of people, largely drawn from one single caste, mostly Marwadis, some Baniyas, Khatris, but almost all from the mercantile caste. And when I'm emphasizing these things, I'm not saying these things are totally deterministic. There are individuals within these caste structures who will behave differently, but there is a worldview that comes with caste and forces. If you have this kind of predominance, it forces something to happen. The media was not very strong before Modi or BJP came to power. The media was subservient. But there was a diversity because there was not the same kind of centralized, organized control that existed. There is a second thing. The mercantile caste has been one of the prime movers of Hindutva, the RSS, and this ideology right from its inception. So for the first time in 2014, you see for this media ownership, a coming together of business interests. Media has to work with government, large owners who own capital, have to work with government because their finances are in some senses held controlled by the government. But in this case, there was an ideological matching between the government and the media ownership. It was not simply a case of media acting because there was pressure from the government. Much of the media today is behaving in this manner because this is the kind of government it wants. This is the kind of country it wants. This is the kind of ideology it wants. Journalists, the vast majority in mainstream media are not being forced to do what they are doing. They are doing it out of their own free will. And this is the structural problem that we are facing in terms of media. This is the question of who owns media, questions on ownership. In comparison to this, what is happening with journalism itself is important but secondary, because as long as there is no diversity of ownership, there is no diversity of worldviews in ownership, if there is no diversity in terms of people who can fund large media, you are not going to get journalism that is going to examine a government or hold it to account. Which is why, as we go into an elections, as we talk to each other, we need to reaffirm our commitment to journalism that asks questions to power, but we also need to establish how that is to be done. This is why, at this point of time, we need the kind of reports that are being prepared, the kind of things we are ourselves in Delhi with the press club debating what are the kind of mandates that we need to put up, something that if not this government, at least the opposition should make part of its charter, because we didn't get here with just this government doing this to media. We got here with the opposition doing the same thing to the media. They have to come on board with the idea of transparency of ownership, an examination of ownership, an examination of funding of media, who owns media. There is more questions asked of a journalist when he's employed as a trainee or she is employed as a trainee than are asked of a media owner before a media owner wants to start an organization. We have no idea of funding, spending, what is happening in a newsroom, what is happening in media ownership. This has to go beyond just simply the kind of declarations we have for other companies. There is something else that comes with a certain responsibility when you enter into the zone of media. So the question of media ownership, its examination, is something that has to be a mandate that we must enforce and get the opposition on board to enforce. We need to go beyond just the question of media ownership and look at the relationship between media ownership and journalists. Because you can have independent journalism if you have independent media, fair enough. But sometimes you can have good journalism even in media houses that are bad. We have all worked, some of our best work or reportage has happened in corporate-owned journalistic organizations. I have seen that myself. What needs to be done is to build up more protections between ownership and journalists who are working with it. The owner's ability to command or dictate the thrust and the norm of what a journalist reports, the kind of protections journalists much enjoy. That means not just in terms of salary, it means in hire and fire and dismissal. must all be part of what we put on the table. And I'm saying this must happen because even when we are talking of independent media houses, even the small independent media houses are not implementing the kind of policies that need to guarantee this for journalism. It is not sufficient that we teach lessons to large media organizations. If we are forming small independent media, journalistic organizations, they must subscribe to values that then we can hold up in terms of employers, in terms of journalists, that we can hold up to large media organizations. We must remember that ultimately it goes up to the question that I had raised in the beginning. I'll end there because there are a lot of specifics, and those specifics have been discussed at the workshop, so I'm not going into all of them. But those nitty-gritty details are important. If we do not focus on those details, if we talk only in large terms, we are going to make the same mistake that we often make in journalism. Opinion is great, but in the end, it is reportage that is going to change what is happening. It is reportage that is going to tell you the truth about what is going wrong with this government. We are living in a country where the concentration of intellectual and financial capital lies today with less than 15% of the population. I'm talking of the upper caste, Baniya, Brahmin control. This is an unevenness of resources that has extended for over 1,500 years in India that was not matched even by apartheid South Africa. At its height, the white population of South Africa was greater than the upper caste population of India is today. And it did not have the same amount of control. This is the structure that this government is keen to preserve, while it is inclusive in terms of drawing in EBCs, OBCs, even Dalits. It is drawing them in a manner which does not question the hierarchy of their presence within this Varna system. The repeated indication by Bhagwat of the importance of not questioning the Varna system lies here. So yes, the larger question of how that is to be changed can only begin by asking these questions. These questions cannot be asked without independent journalism, independent media. That cannot exist till we don't look at sources of funding, of possibilities of how we set up different structures, how we change the reality that is beaming into every house. And that ultimately is our goal. It will not happen today or tomorrow, but we need to do the hard work of reports, writing, questions, actual positions that we take. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Artosh. Difficult issues to raise, but they need to be raised, even as we show our solidarities. We worked in the newsroom together many, many years ago, and we've continued to be in very close touch. And Geeta Seshu, whom I'm about to invite, also knew Gauri extremely well. And she is a journalist, a feminist, a committed trade unionist, committed free speech activist, and academic, media analyst, and also a active civil libertarian against hate speech. So that's a good combination. Geeta Seshu.
So many hats. It's difficult to balance all of them. Thank you so much, people from the Gauri Trust and Kavita, Deepu, Tista, and all of you here for being here and for inviting me and allowing me to speak. I knew Gauri, but not as well as perhaps many of you here. I have this distinct memory still of her laugh when she spoke to me about the kind of threats that many writers in Karnataka were facing after the killing of Professor Kalburgi. And at that time she said that there's a list of writers who are being threatened, and she said that she was fourth on the list. But she said with a laugh, and I'll never forget that, I can never get it out of my head, that she was the first woman on the list. And I remember talking to her and saying, you know, you should be careful, you need to be careful. What do you need to do to protect yourself, and she just laughed. She just refused to even think it was important. So many of us have remembered conversations and relived so many of the discussions we've had with Gauri, and I'm trying to think of what she would have made of today's very, very important discussion, which is on reconstructing the Fourth Estate. She tried to do a lot of that in her own work and through the Lankesh Patrike. I think she did really go beyond what one would conventionally call journalism and what one would conventionally look at as the media, because she extended the boundaries that were drawn perhaps by other people or by very flawed or debatable understanding of how the media should be and what the media should be, as a spectator, not as a participant in society. And I think she definitely tried and extended those boundaries to the best of her abilities and paid for it with her life. Today we also need to look at the question of impunity when it comes to the killing not just of Gauri Lankesh, but of many others who have been killed, have faced violent ends because they have had the courage to speak out, because they've had the courage to dissent. And this is a growing number. And every year we go through this exercise, really, of documenting the number of people who have been speaking out, who have been dissenting, and who have paid for it either with their lives, or who have been charged, who have been arrested, who are still in jail. We have about 15 journalists who are charged under the UAPA in India as we speak. We have about 7 of them still behind bars. We have a very moving account really in The Wire from Umar Khalid just after Gauri was killed. And today we know that there is absolutely no sign of any kind of freedom for him, because hearings on his bail are continuously being delayed. On the 31st, we are expecting the courts to again hear it and perhaps again postpone the hearing, a decision on whether he should be set free, at least on bail. And there are so many others who are still in jail, who are still unable to even face some modicum of freedom, leave alone justice. Leave alone justice for people who have been killed, leave alone justice for people who have been attacked, who have been charged wrongly, and who still languish in jail. So the battle really to protect and to fight for those who dissent and who dare to dissent is a very, very long and painful one. It is extremely isolating and very difficult sometimes for families who suffer this, because invariably the burden of fighting and struggling is really with the people who are closest to those who who need to be fought for. So I think to a great extent what we discussed also in the last 2 days of deliberations was how to break the kind of silences and the kind of isolation really of people, journalists, especially journalists, because that was the major discussion for the last 2 days on how to keep fighting and how to keep managing to struggle and how to build those solidarities. That's a big issue, really. And it is something that we can all do when we continue to meet, we continue to have this kind of dialogue and discussion. Hartosh spoke fabulously, of course, about the challenges before the media and laid out the terrain very well, so I really don't want to go back into that I don't need to. He has already spoken a bit about this. But I'd like to add a few things. And one of the things that occurred to me when you spoke about media and owners of media, one of the things that we tend to miss for some reason, I'm unable to understand, but we do tend to forget that the owners of media, the owners of big business today, are also in Parliament. They are the people who also make the laws that are today the most oppressive and the most draconian of measures to regulate and control the media. We are facing this at such a major level. Mr. Nath, who's here, has documented and has listed out quite a few of this in the last issue of the Caravan, which you can read. There are ways in which the media is being regulated, from permissions to own media, permissions to start a media house. There are ways in which the media is regulated, whether it is not just big media, big legacy media, but also very small YouTubers or very small journalists who want to use the internet or who even want to start radio. It's impossible now. And with the new broadcast bill, which is still under consultation, and let us hope that they listen to the kind of submissions that have been made by various journalists, organizations, and groups like ours. Whether they will listen is a big question mark. And the reason why they do not listen, and they will not, I suspect, will not even bother to listen, is because we have a dispensation today which has succeeded in making the media irrelevant, completely irrelevant. So we have fabulous journalism. We have investigative journalism. We have journalists who are laying their lives on the line to bring out the stories, to challenge those narratives, and to speak. But these are being silenced, not by killing, which is of course the ultimate censorship, not even by charging them or filing cases against them, but by simply disregarding them, by ignoring them completely, and not even having basic courtesy and respect of even responding to the kind of issues that are being raised. So we have excellent journalism. We have fabulous work from investigative journalists about corruption, about cases, about policies that have gone wrong completely, about environmental destruction that is completely destroying the country. From Kashmir to Kanyakumari, we have immense data of what is actually going wrong. But none of this is being given any kind of credence, because we have a government that is completely negating any of this kind of journalism or any of the information that is important. So it's not just about creating another narrative. It's also about completely invisibilizing whatever needs to come out and whatever people need to be informed with. That is, I think, a huge challenge about how we make information that is important and relevant to people, again, make a difference and actually make an impact. We have, of course, people here who have been working and who've been really struggling to break this kind of silences. And I think we will have to continue to find ways and strategize and see how we can actually make that difference. I think the fact that all of us are here today and the fact that we've had 2 days of very, very important discussions leading up to today's meeting, there is definitely hope, and there's definitely resistance. There is a lot of resistance, there is a lot of efforts to push back. How we actually manage to do that, how we actually manage to get the few of us together to be able to push back and to be able to resist is going to make all the difference going forward. And we have really no second chance on this. I'll stop here, and I hope we can continue to have some kind of a dialogue on this, because conversation is all that we can at least start with. Thank you so much.
You know, Umar Khalid, who you mentioned, Geeta, and the other journalists who are now under the terror law. It's not just under criminal law, but under terror law, like Siddiq Kappan was, and Geeta and others had a lot to do with very close work to assist with his release, legal aid, defense for his release. So Umar Khalid, Kanaiya, Jignesh, and even Shaila Rashid have been very often invitees to the Gauri Memorial Trust programs after 2017. And it's very, very unfortunate what this whole UAPA detention has been, particularly after the Delhi 2020 violence, and even about the Bhima Koregaon case for that matter, because that was 2018. So this whole use of the law, and just to add one thing to what Geeta said about these people as owners are sitting in parliament, I remember Sainath doing an analysis once to show that the percentage of Arabpatis, that Crorepati's in parliament, and how many of that percentage, which was about 53 or 54% he had calculated in up to 2014, that is in 2009, went up to 83% in 2019. And that these Crorepati's are also owners of mining companies, environment, telecom companies, and mobile companies. And of course, television owners as well. So you have a complete stranglehold on your parliamentary democracy in that sense, whatever it is. There could be no better person to kind of take this forward and sort of be our last speaker for the evening, even in terms of seniority. I don't want to mention the age, but I'm going to. No, I won't mention the age. Paranjay Gua Thakurta, a household name. He's done some fantastic and extremely courageous work, known all over the world, English, Bangla, Hindi, not just print where he began, but also audiovisual documentaries. And he's also making films, and amazingly versatile, very committed, very courageous. Thank you, Paranjay.
Thank you very much, Tista. Thank you, Kavita. Thank you, everybody here, all of you here. It is truly my honor and my privilege. I thank all those who are associated with the trust for asking me to come here. And I will share a few anecdotes of my personal association with Gauri. But before I do so, I want to elaborate on a few points, and those who've been here for the last 2 days listening to the deliberations of what we can do to change the working of the mass media in this country will excuse me if some of the points I made I'm repeating all over again, because this is a bigger and I guess a more diverse audience. The first thing is the media and big business. Yes, this is a fact. This is not new. I mean, if you go back in time and look at the interests of the Birlas, indirectly the Tatas, they were all part of, they had interests in the media. The difference is that, they use the media to influence government policies. Many of them were supporters of right-wing political parties, including the Swatantra Party. Then from the 80s and the 90s, things started changing. The media itself became so profitable that those who started with the media, including, say, companies like the Dainik Jagran, Dainik Bhaskar, two of the most widely circulated newspapers in the country and the world, those profits were used to diversify into everything from coal mining to real estate. The fourth estate indeed was real estate. In certain respects, the wheel has turned again. And today, who are among the biggest owners of the media? Not just Mr. Ambani, not just Mr. Adani, the Jains who own, or now the two brothers have split. We don't know their wealth because their companies, they don't have shares that are listed in the stock exchange, but I dare say they would be among the richest persons in this country. So that, to some extent, explains why such a large section of the so-called mainstream media, Mukhya Dhara, Mool Dhara, is so overtly, blatantly, brazenly in support not just of the status quo, but those who are in positions of power and authority. Now, this has been going on for a long time. Now, what has really changed in the last 10 years? Yes, we had the emergency. Today we have an undeclared emergency. That emergency lasted from June 1975 to March 1977. This emergency is almost 10 years old, the undeclared emergency. But there's something more than that. The difference is that whoever's in power, they're not just intolerant. Yeah, they are intolerant, of course. And this cuts across ideologies, political parties, those who are in power. The difference is the present regime has been vengeful, particularly vengeful, and due to a variety of circumstances, including the way the media has evolved across the world, you see the dependence on government money for media organizations has grown. And that explains why the government is exercising, and those who are in positions of power exercising such a huge influence in what you read and what you watch and what you hear. Let's move on a little bit. Gauri stood for certain values. She could have worked in the so-called mainstream media. Yes, her father is a very eminent person. He took up his mantle, but she chose to work in Kannada. And that is very important. She could have been very, very happy in the Times of India and in the Indian Express and the Hindustan Times or wherever. No. She wanted to reach out to larger numbers of people. And that is very, very important for us to note. The second point to note is that when Gauri passed away, we were seeing the beginning of the unprecedented growth of the so-called social media. When more and more young people were being educated in WhatsApp University, to use Ravish Kumar's memorable phrase, and the other phrase he uses, the Godi media, the lapdog media. Now, what was interesting is, say, take one particular example, and I give this as an example because it's very, very common. It's not today, but about 12 or 13 years ago, a young man, he's related to me, he came to me and he asked me, not all Muslims are terrorists, but all terrorists are Muslim. I said, where did you get to know about this? And he said, WhatsApp. Yes, of course, WhatsApp is behind every single major mob lynching, communal conflagration in this country in the recent past. But I'm saying, when you try and explain to them, is terrorism the prerogative of a particular religion? The answer is clearly no. But as soon as you mention the word Hindu terrorism, and as soon as you mention the name of a member of parliament whose first name is Pragya, as soon as you mention the circumstances under which Gauri died, as did Kalburki and Govind Dabolkar, you suddenly come across a kind of sense of, that you don't want to believe this is possible. That there can be a quote-unquote Hindu terrorist. Let's move on a little bit. Because what happened to Gauri also epitomizes many things that have gone wrong today in this country. You told you're a journalist, therefore you can't be an activist. You're a journalist, but you have to be quote-unquote objective, balanced, unbiased. These are loaded terms, which mean different things to different people. But there is this entire sense of false equivalence which is today pervading the media. I'm tempted to give you a very trivial example. Mr. A says it is raining, Mr. B says it's not raining, but the journalist is too bloody lazy to go out and see whether it's raining or not. That is unfortunately where the media has degenerated. You see, many of us were multiple identities and more than one person has talked about it, as did Gauri. Okay, I'm a man, I'm a husband, I'm a father, I'm a journalist, I'm a citizen of this country, I'm a citizen of this world. So which identity matters more? Or do all my identities matter equally? You know, when I heard about what happened to Gauri, September 2017, I was reminded of something I was told when I began journalism, and Isa's right, that was 46 years ago, I'm 68 years old, and that was like, are you biased? My editor said, he's no more, Bhavani Sengupta, why are you ashamed of your bias? Are you biased against the corrupt? Are you biased against those who exploit the poor and the underprivileged? Then you should be proud of your bias. I mean, that is where I think Gauri showed an entire generation the way. Let me just argue a few points, which in a sense today, Gauri epitomizes all these things. The media is today where it is because it is failing to play the duty that it is supposed to play in a quote-unquote democracy. What is that? Ask questions, hold truth to power, hold accountable those who are in positions of power and authority. Far from being a watchdog, you become a lapdog, especially if the lap belongs to a powerful politician or a businessman or a military officer or a mafia don. Yeah. So what happens is that when you are not able to hold truth to power, when you're not asking questions, then you are what you are today. This is the state of the media. This is the fourth estate. It's not just real estate. It is a travesty of what journalism should be in a democracy. How does this happen? Why does this happen? It starts from the top. And let me just quickly tell you that Shri Narendra Modi happens to be the one and only Prime Minister of India who's never, underline never, held an unscripted press conference where any journalist could ask him any question. He picks and chooses the journalists who question him, and they ask him questions he wants to be asked. They ask him, they don't follow up with those questions. You want those names? I can tell you those names. I have no hesitation. Some of them may be ideologically committed towards him, like Rajat Sharma. Some of them may have been privileged to spend a few weeks behind bars, like Sudhir Chaudhary. There's Anjana Om Kashyap. There's the one and only Arnab Goswami. Where is Shiv Sundar? The Arnabization of the media has happened. Yeah, sure. I mean, there are many more names. My friend RSS, he told me his name, he's called RSS, Rahul Shiv Shankar. So it's all right. I mean, there are journalists and journalists. Mr. Modi gives interviews to non-journalists as well. Please go ahead and see his interview with Prasoon Joshi. And the famous interview he gave with that well-known actor. You know, he used to be a citizen of Canada. He pays a lot of money as income tax. His driver asked him to ask the Prime Minister of the world's largest democracy a very important question. मोदी जी आप आम कैसे खाते हैं? आप काट के खाते हैं या चूस के खाते हैं? If this is something that is steeped from the top, those at the bottom, we are being pushed. And what my speakers before me told and what Gauri stood for, the journalists were vulnerable because they're not in Bangalore. They're not like me or Gauri who can speak in English. No. They are paying the price because they don't have the protection of the English language or having to live in a city. They are vulnerable. Geeta just talked about the journalists who've been arrested under the UAPA, the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act, which is arguably the most draconian law on the statute books of this country. So, Gauri epitomized values in journalism as a human being which we have to struggle for, which we must struggle for, irrespective of who's in power, which politician is power, because that is going to be the soul of us, our society, the most heterogeneous and diverse society on planet Earth. 13 years ago, I would come to this city very regularly. I was making a film on the Bellari brothers, Gali Janardhan Reddy, his brothers. One of the people who helped me extensively, she did everything she could to help me, was Gauri. Please see, she features in that. She comes to life. And I feel so strange coming back here, knowing that 4 individuals who featured prominently in that documentary film that I worked on, it's a 1.5 hour long documentary, are not here, including Gauri, including the human rights lawyer K.G. Kannabiran, including the great writer, scholar, literature, Dr. U.R. Ananthamurthy, including the brilliant singer, the Telugu singer Gadar. There are no more. All I can say is that each and every one of us have to embody and imbibe the values that Gauri stood for. As an independent woman, as an independent journalist, as an independent activist, as an independent thinker. Even after she passed away, I've heard terrible things being said about her by people I considered liberal. I'm not even going to tell you about them because they themselves reveal their own insecurity. And one thing that Gauri never was, but she was never insecure about her convictions. She was never ashamed, never reticent to talk about them. So I wish all of you here and every single person here, I wish all of us can strive to live by the values that Gauri Lankesh stood for. Born on the 29th of January, 1962, brutally killed in front of her home on the 5th of September 2017. 55 is no age to go. Thank you very much for listening to me.
I just invite Professor Sridhar on behalf of the trust to call Amma to just give that little token. We'll wind up now. I think we've had a good meeting. We had also a long day. But I think a small token that the trust, little books. So we'll just ask Amma to, Vijay Amma to give it to you.
I think Vijayama is one of the senior-most journalists here among the assembly, so we request her to give away a small token of her appreciation to all our guests.
And one more thing which I'll say when I introduce Vijayama, one of the most beautiful books in Kannada about film, which is written by her, which got, they retrieved back from publication because of, it's about cinema, and then, Kannada cinema, and because of the way the industry works, the censorship works in that manner. So that way, reconstructing fourth estate, and she is giving away this as a great role.
Yeah, we can first now. I say I've been saying the whole day. I don't know what to say anymore, except thank you very, very much, everybody, for being here. I was asking you to say, and you're telling me to say.